Hello and welcome to the final episode of Under African Skies. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Wilkistar Otieno, who's going to take us on a journey to Kenya. Hello and welcome to the final episode of Under. Thank you for joining me this evening. We don't need to hear that in stereo. Sorry about that. I don't know where you are. I know that we have people listening to us from all over the world, but right now in Milwaukee, it is cold and rainy and dark and nasty. So we need to leave all of that behind and transport ourselves to the African continent, and then we'll take our journey, our very well-deserved journey for the end of the week.
Oh, shake it for Africa, yeah, do it for Africa. Mama, oh, mama, oh, shake it for Africa. Oh, you rise up and stand up for Africa.
See the whole world be looking at us, yeah, cause our land is honey, all the future money, and see Akijima, no, Asilali, see Atandi Mali, they want it, yo. They need it, man, we have it, yes. Let the world come and taste this beautiful land. They want it, oh, they need it, yeah. We have it, let the world come and taste this beautiful land.
I love my Africa, oh Africa, rise up. I love my Africa, my love for Africa, rise up. We are one Africa, together, in Africa, rise up. I love my Africa, rise up.
I'm so happy to be a part of this continent. All your sisters and your brothers and your friends, let's get together, let's hold hands and let us dance. Let's unite and give ourselves another chance.
So as I mentioned, now that we've at least gotten to the right continent, today our guide is Dr. Wilkistar Otieno. And I'll just make a parenthetical phrase here to say that all our speakers have had a real connection to stars. Wilkistar has a star in her name, so that should tell you how invested we all are with the cosmos. She is a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in industrial and manufacturing engineering and has been at UWM, I'm happy to report, for 10 years. I am so happy that you're here with us, Wilkistar, to take us on this guided tour.
Thank you so much, Dr. Creighton. It's my pleasure, and thank you for welcoming me. I want to shout out to my family, some of whom are watching, and some friends and colleagues. Thank you.
Oh, that's great.
And my students too.
Yay. So go ahead and tell us about Kenya. Now, as I said, this is now the 5th program, and you are good neighbors with Malawi. If people remember, Dr. Lucy gave a talk about Malawi. Tell us about near neighbors, I should say, not exactly neighbors. Tell us about the neighbors of Kenya.
So before we talk about Kenya, let me talk about our neighbors. We have Tanzania to the south. We have Uganda to the east, rather to the west, Somalia to the east, Ethiopia to the north, and we have the young country of South Sudan to the northwest. We predominantly share peaceful borders with our neighbors, and particularly it's for this reason that Kenya houses the 2 largest refugee camps in the world, the Dadaab refugee camp and the Kakuma refugee camp. So the Kakuma refugee camp is a few miles south of South Sudan, inside of Kenya. And the Dadaab, Dadaab is a collection of 3 smaller refugee camps which make up the Dadaab complex. And so the Dadaab refugee camp is around the Garissa region, which is closer to Somalia. We have had these refugee camps for a very long time. I welcome you to actually visit the UNHCR website where you'll get the numbers. I think total we have about 300 to 400,000 refugees that are living in Kenya peacefully, and we coexist well.
Yes. In addition to being gentle with their neighbors, Kenya has a very interesting, varied terrain. The capital is Nairobi. The tallest peak is Mount Kenya. And in the north, there is this large desert. However, you're not connected to any of these parts in particular. Your homeland, your particular homeland, is much closer to Lake Victoria on the west side. Please
Absolutely.
tell us about your home.
So if you were to meet me somewhere in the market, or if you were to visit my home, they would call me Nyarmumbo. Nyarmumbo means the lady from Mumbo area. So my home is the Mumbo area, which houses the city of Oyugis. It's a small town, so I'll call it the town of Oyugis, which is about an hour and a half away from Lake Victoria. Pretty much, we used to call it Lake Sango before it changed its name. And Lake Victoria is the second largest freshwater lake, following Lake Superior, which is north of us here in Wisconsin. And so Oyugis is known to be, Mumbo actually as a whole is known to be a very rich place, and riches in terms of produce. As you can see, that child there is having a wonderful time playing, and the soil is pretty much red. We call it Luala. Luala means the red soil. And if you play around as a kid with a white dress, it will take forever for that stain to come out, if it will ever come out.
Your mother never thanks you for that, right?
Not at all. And so this red soil is the red volcanic soil, and pretty much almost all crops can grow on that soil. The second reason why Mumbo was known, it was known as a place where there was rainfall. We actually pride in having 2 rain seasons. Much of Kenya has 1 rainy season. We have 2 rain seasons. We have the long rains, which begin in April, May time. And so those crops take about 4 months. They're harvested in August. And August, we have the short rains beginning. So if you're from Mumbo, you don't want to be at home in August, because you will be working, harvesting, and planting back to back. So for that reason, the Mumbo people are known to be very hardworking. And so, but to give you a context of Kenya, I looked it up. Wisconsin is about 55,000 square miles. Kenya is about 225 square miles. So I think 4.5 Wisconsin will fit into the country of Kenya.
I see. Yes, that's a good comparison. Now, we have heard various people before, speakers talk about the ethnic groups in their country. And you're going to give us an overview, sort of the bigger picture of the whole continent.
Thank you. So you've had a speaker from Algeria, which is to the north, kind of northwest side. You've had a speaker from Egypt, which is right at the north towards the east side. You've had a speaker from Uganda, which is our neighboring country to the west. You've had a speaker from the country of Malawi, my colleague Lucy Mkandawire, who comes from Malawi, and Malawi is to the south of Tanzania. And so for you to understand the people of Africa, this map here is a depiction of the larger ethno-linguistic groups. Kenya has about 45 to 48 tribes or languages spoken. And these tribes can be understood from the umbrella of these huge ethno-linguistic groups. So look at the yellow, which is right at the top. Those are the linguistic groups that are made up of the Hamitic and the Semitic. Now, if you look at the country of Kenya, you see 3 colors predominantly. You see yellow, you see a burgundy type of looking color, and the green color. The yellow, we call the inhabitants of that area the Cushitic groups. They make up many languages right there. The burgundy, red, deep red or burgundy color, that makes up the Nilotic groups. The Nilotic people are known to have come from the country of Chad, which is to the north of Sudan, and the area of South Sudan. They traveled, migrated southwards. Some of them, like my people, the Luo people, decided to settle around the Lake Victoria region, while the Maasais, who are also Nilotic, and the Kalenjin went towards the north a little bit, or settled at the north, but the Maasais went farther south. Why were they doing that? Of course, mostly it's because they were looking for greener pastures for their cattle. Maasais are known to be herdsmen and women. And then we have the Bantus, which really is the vast majority. But right now, I ask you to look up the numbers because the Western ethno-linguistic groups might actually be predominantly spoken because the population there is much higher. But the Bantus are actually, it's really a huge group of people who spans the central, a little bit of West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, as well as Southern Africa. And so the Kenyan Bantus are predominantly those who migrated from the country of Zaire or Congo, as we know.
This is, as I said, this is a wonderful kind of visualization of how many different people live in your country. They do say that there's more diversity of humans on the African continent alone than there is every other place in the world.
Absolutely.
And we have the opportunity to hear your lovely explanation of your flag.
Very proud of this flag too. If you were there when the speaker from Malawi presented, the colors are similar to what they have. The meaning is similar to what they have. The black represents the people of Kenya, predominantly Black people. I will just stop here to say that we have Indians, Asians, we have Arabs who call Kenya home. And so I will not stand here to say that Kenya is mostly all Black people. It's just the majority of the people. And then the two white stripes say, we speak for peace and justice, the two white stripes. And then the red, just like in Malawi and most countries in Africa, red represent the blood of the people that was shed at the time when we were fighting for independence from the colonial government. And then the green represents our mainstay, the greenery of the region. Farming is what gives us sustainability and food. And so that's the green. And not to forget the shield and the two arrows. The Maasai shield represents that the fact that we are fighting, are defending our nation in any way that we can.
Right. So now we're going to take the conversation of the various groups into a historical context. So take us back, what, 5,000 years ago?
5,000 years ago, and 1 hour will not exhaust what should be said. However, this presentation is just to give you a glimpse so that immediately we finish, you'll want to look for the book that would give you a best depiction of the history of the country of Kenya, and most even Africa, now that we finished the series today. And so I want to appreciate the fact that there were people who lived in Kenya before 330 BC. And those are the pastoralists. And then in 3000 BC, we get, and this information I got from books that are available, information that's available online. About 3000 BC, we see the Cushitic people who migrated from the north and settled to the northeast of the country. And that's the yellow that you can see on the map. In about 1000, we see the Nilotic people. Like I told you, most of them came from the country of Chad and Sudan, settled around Lake Victoria and further down towards Mount Kilimanjaro. We have the Bantu, which is the green. And like I said, most of the Bantus who settled in Kenya predominantly came from Central Africa, Congo, and the region and the countries or the regions above. And then I don't want to forget the fact that about 1000 to 1500 AD, the Arabic people started to settle in the coastal region of Kenya. I would imagine that most of the audience have actually heard about the spoken language in Kenya predominantly is Swahili. And so Swahili came up as an amalgamation of the Bantu languages as well as the Arabic language, hence came up the language of Swahili. And language is living, language is transient and dynamic. And so we have Swahili and it's continuing to evolve over time.
Like language tends to. Let's move into what we might call the Middle Ages here.
Yes, so I will not spend so much time, and this is when a book will do you some good. About 1300 to 1500 AD, we see explorers coming into Africa, curiosity to know what's going on in this continent. The name that we were taught when we were in school, and probably some of you who are historians have heard about, is the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama. About 1600, we see Arab traders coming in. They brought a lot of spices from the Arab world. Unfortunately, with that came slavery. So we did have, unfortunately, slave trade taking place in the coastal region of Kenya, as well as Tanzania and Zanzibar as well. So these people were being taken to work in the Arabic world. And then later on, we see the British explorers coming in. And when they come in, the name that probably you've heard about is David Livingstone, that I learned when I was in school. And then because of that, slavery was abolished about early 1900s. But because of the British coming in as explorers, unfortunately, at that point, British declared Kenya, as well as the countries around East Africa, Tanzania, but definitely Uganda, to be their protectorate. Mm-hmm. Then we became colonies.
But things changed.
Things changed. So because of that, of course, Kenyans were not happy to be ruled in that way. And so we see a lot of rebellion coming in. I have spelt out the name Mekatilili wa Mwenza because I learned, and it's true, she was a woman who led the Giriama people, it's another ethnic group, against the colonial government. And so all this, I won't forget the traders, the Indian traders who came in, because that's when the Indian community began to come into Kenya. And right now, if you go to Kenya, there are so many Indians who call Kenya home. We see the Mau Mau uprising. Why is Mau Mau known? I believe it's because the British government kind of set their capital in Nairobi around the central region where the Kikuyus live. And so Mau Mau was predominantly led by the Kikuyu group. And sort of it really kind of spearheaded a lot of the movement. And we see a lot of the leaders that were arrested, Jomo Kenyatta being one of them, Dedan Kimathi, and we have many names that you will see or read about. And then we had Tom Mboya, who was not arrested. He was a young man at that time, I believe in his 30s. And so he became kind of led against the struggle, but he actually was one of the people who helped as we moved into independence in 1963. But before then, he worked with the US government as well as the Canadian government. And then that's when we had the Kennedy airlifts. A lot of you have heard about Barack Obama Sr., who was one of the airlifts. And what are airlifts? These are Kenyan people that were given scholarships to come and study economics and other areas of need. Wangari Maathai studied, environmental, so she was an environmentalist. And so they came to the US and Canada with a promise that they would go back and help the government as it grows during its independence.
Okay. So now Kenya becomes a sovereign state, you said in 1963.
1963, we celebrate it as Jamhuri Day when we became a foreign state. Jomo Kenyatta becomes our first president. And later on, unfortunately, he dies in 1978. Daniel Arap Moi becomes the second president. And up until that time, Kenya is a single party government. But I want to spell out that in 1992, we had a lot of activists, political activists, who ushered in the era of multi-partyism. And since then, our country is a multi-party democratic country. we've had predominantly peaceful elections. I know you've heard about our unrests during the election, but the Kenyan people speak for peace. So eventually peace prevails. And then, of course, we have our third president, Honorable Mwai Kibaki, not to forget Wangari Maathai, who was the first African Nobel laureate for peace. She was an environmentalist. And I won't forget to say that in the 2010s, 2020, a lot of things are happening. We see Uhuru becoming the fourth president. We have the LGBT Pride event happening peacefully, I should say. Lupita Nyong'o wins her first Oscar for the movie 12 Years a Slave. And not to forget, Eliud Kipchoge is able to run the marathon in under 2 hours, which to me as a runner is a huge thing to accomplish.
Well, of course, there's a very long tradition of runners in your country, so you should be proud. And happily, we're not running marathons tonight. We can enjoy food, however, just like any marathon runner. Please tell us about some of the kind of the more characteristic foods in your country.
Yes, and just like every other thing, an hour will not do it justice. But this slide here, I would like to let the audience know that in both pictures, you have one meal called ugali, and that is the white looking meal. It is a corn-based meal, just made out of corn flour and water. Whenever we have guests coming into Kenya, they're like, but this thing doesn't have taste. It's not supposed to have taste. It is a base that you enjoy with any other food that's accompanying it. So to your left, you have fish, and that's initially predominantly eaten by the people that either lived around a lake, around a big river. But right now, of course, with trade, it's enjoyed by everyone. To the right, you're enjoying ugali with some sukuma. Sukuma is kale in Kenya, or collard greens, depending on which species, as well as some good-looking meat stew.
We should have had a warning. People should eat before this program. Go ahead. What else? What other delectables do we have here?
So the meal that is on your left, that meal is called pilau. Pilau is eaten in predominantly any tribe or ethnic group that had the influence of the Arabic world, as well as the Indian ethnic groups. And it's because of the spices. Pilau is loaded with spices, very delicious, and it's basically rice with some either meat or just there's also vegetable-based pilau and sometimes also chicken. To the right-hand side, however, the top one is called irio. And just like any country, depending on where you go, you'll find different staple. So irio is mostly eaten in the central region. The central region is known to produce the vast majority of potato. And so this is a meal that's made out of green corn or maize, as we call it in Kenya, as well as peas and some potatoes mashed together into a very delectable dish called irio or mukimo, depending on where you go. To the right-hand side, that is actually my mother's table. Just a random breakfast on a one particular day. The Mumbo people enjoy having big, delicious bananas. In the US, we'd call them plantains. So we have that for breakfast, just boiled, delicious. And then we also have big peanuts that we eat with either tea or porridge. We have fruit because of that, the fact that we have rainfall that we enjoy most of the year. You can see it's enjoyed. You have a good breakfast and you're good to go.
Wow. I must say that this is a personal connection. My mother went to Kenya, went to Nairobi in the early 80s for a peace conference. And she was so enamored by the Kenyan mangoes. I don't think she had ever eaten a mango before. In Greece, they don't grow. that she smuggled in. You're not supposed to do this, but she smuggled in a few mangoes before we knew you're not supposed to. And she brought it to the table, and I remember trying one and thinking, whoa, this is really, really special. So I have tasted a little bit of fruit from Kenya.
And I think that mango may have been from the Kamba region or from the coastal region, because there you will find the most delicious mangoes. Unfortunately, not in Mumbo.
Well, you can't have everything. We customarily now in this series talk about art after we've filled our bellies with food. This is modern. These are modern paintings now. And I'm intrigued by the lower left one, lower right one. Can you
Yes.
tell us about that?
So the lower right one is depicting what we call a matatu. If you have visited Kenya or any other country, maybe in Africa, but mostly in East Africa, you have traveled in a matatu. The majority of us depend on public transportation to move from one place to another. And so why I wanted us to talk about the matatu is because the matatus have two purposes, actually, many purposes. They give jobs to people, number one, they transport people. But what I like to say about the art that's in it is that a lot of matatus are painted, and it's just beautiful to see the creativity that comes out of Kenyans. And sometimes it's a message about, religion, their religious beliefs, or a message about what's going on in the world. When President Biden has won, you'll definitely see a matatu that's rejoicing about that. You will see a matatu that's talking about a celebrity who has done something, or just passing a message. Be careful when you drive.
Okay. So artistic messages, if you will.
Absolutely.
There are more artifacts here. Tell us about these.
So we have the musical instrument that's on your left-hand top side. That's called an orutu. Orutu is used by the Luo people. And actually most tribes will have at least a percussion, they'll have a wind instrument, and then they'll have a drum of some sort. And so that's our type of a string instrument. We have the beads, predominantly used by the Maasais right now, but I will say that there are other Cushitic ethnic groups that use a lot of beads for their adornment, and actually they use them for their daily wear as well. In the middle, you'll actually see cup kind of looking, art, especially the ones farther out from your view. Those ones are made out of soapstone. And soapstone is mined in different parts of the country, particularly in the Kisii region. And to the lower side, you have the art that's made out of wood. Anyone who visits Kenya, if you don't bring one of these, we don't think you really went to Kenya. So,
we don't believe you.
yes, exactly. But what I want us to also talk about is the fabric that you have, which is a wraparound on your right top side. We call them leso. Or if you go to Tanzania, they'll call them kanga. I like to talk about it because besides the beautiful art that's come out of the creativity of people, it's of course worn by women. And if you squint, you'll see some writings that's written towards the bottom of it. Africans speak in riddles. And so you'll see a lot of riddles written on them. And sometimes the wearer of that leso is trying to tell you a message, or the wearer of that leso is trying to give you some advice. And so whenever women or anyone buys a leso, you always want to be careful to read what's written in there.
I see. If you approve the message, right?
If you approve the message, or it speaks to what you want to say.
I see. Okay. Let's look at dwellings of people, all people.
Yes. And so what this slide is telling us is, just like any society today, we have the upper class depicted on your right lower side of this slide right here. We have the upper middle class depicted on the upper left-hand side of this slide. And then we have the working low to upper middle class, if I could call it, And in Kenya, we call them hustlers. We are hustlers. We look for jobs in any way that we can get. And so we have those high rises that you will see them in any city that you go, Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, anywhere you go, you'll find those high rises. But not to forget that there are our humble homes in the rural villages. And mostly, you know, of course, even in the rural villages, you'll find brick houses, but we want to appreciate the fact that we have houses that are made of mud. The reason why really Africans made houses out of mud is, I remember you talked to Dr. Mkandawire, is it matters what your house is made of if you don't have AC and you don't have heating. And so all this makes sense. So that's what this is depicting.
Yes. Yes, mud can be cool if it's hot outside, and that has to be a concern. We have an opportunity to talk about the various people of Kenya, and we're going to focus on some of your personal heroes.
And so I'll just preempt here that, again, 1 hour will not do me any justice. I appreciate all the politicians that we've had who have made great contributions to the country. I appreciate all runners and athletes who have shown what Kenya can do to the world with all the medals that they brought home. I appreciate all the artists that make the life of people happy, especially these terrible times of COVID-19. I appreciate all people, teachers especially, who do their best. But I have just singled out a few here. Wangari Maathai was an activist. She was a sustainability activist. And she was the first woman in East and Central Africa to attain the doctorate degree at the University of Nairobi. She actually turned to be nominated and won the Nobel Peace Prize. And so for that reason, we are proud of what Wangari Maathai did. And also particularly also, she was an activist against political detention. And so to me, she represents all the women who are in the struggle and work hard to better the society.
Yes, that makes for a personal hero, to be sure.
So I single out Ngugi wa Thiong'o too, because I think anyone who is listening might want to know, okay, where do I go next if I want to know more, whether through fiction or through reality? I single out Ngugi wa Thiong'o because actually he's been nominated for the Nobel for Literature about 3 times. I am looking for the time that he will win. He's to me, he represents the writers, all the literally writers who have presented Kenya in one way or another. And so he has several books, and I just singled out The River Between as a place to begin. But I will say that while Ngugi wa Thiong'o has written a lot of books, sometimes a lot of his books will be written from the Kikuyu cultural perspective. And so dig around, there are many other women, Grace Ogot, amongst others, who've also depicted Kenya from other cultural perspectives.
Yes, it has become clear that it really isn't possible to cover all your bases for all the cultures that are in the country, but it's nice to start somewhere. So I appreciate that. That's going on my list for my holiday reading.
And so the third person that I decided to highlight, not to say that I am partisan or anything in this era of bipartisan, I appreciate all the politicians that have made contributions to the country of Kenya, but I do single out Raila Odinga because he, to me, represents, he represents first a family of members of that family. His father was the first vice president. He was in the struggle back in the day with Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. I single him out as having arguably, or people will agree mostly, that he represents those who for a very long time have been active in the political arena in the country. I believe he is a peacemaker because of all the unrest that we had during our election. At one point, he had to come together with the president so that they can peacefully bring the country to the next point. And so he became a prime minister. So I single him out just to represent all those people who've been very active in ensuring our political, and also just bringing this multi-partism to make sure we don't go to a point of dictatorship.
Right. And you make a point to say that he and other many leaders in Kenya have been at it for a long time. Like they don't have meteoric appearances. They really stick to the purpose for decades.
Yes.
To stay stable. And Kenya is famous around the world of being a place that is stable, relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking.
Well, we're all relatively speaking, right? We all could use some help. At this point, we talk about your personal connection with the stars.
Yes. So, and this I had to a little bit get help from my parents. And so for that, I say thank you. The first connection that I didn't have to get help from them is the fact that I remember as a young girl visiting my grandmother in the village. I marveled and could not wait for the appearance of the full moon. I was too young to know that it was actually a monthly occurrence, about 29 days. I was too young to know that, but I knew that it happened and I looked forward to it. So the connection that we have here is the full moon was a joyous occasion. Back in the day, before lighting came around, or even before transportation was easy, our ancestors waited for the full moon to plan for weddings, to plan for celebrations. As a kid, we didn't have to go to bed so early, lest we miss the beauty of this full moon. The young people went for their dances during a full moon. So that's the first connection.
I just want to pause here because I want people to think, I mean, some of our listeners might have shared that experience with you, but I don't think I've met many people in my life who really viscerally know the difference that a full moon makes if you don't have street lights, if you don't have all the light pollution. They might be thinking, what's the big deal about the full moon? But it changed life in a real way. And it was, as you say, a joyous occasion where you could do things for those couple days that you
up
wouldn't
till the
do.
night. Absolutely. And just to give you perspective, we are on the equator. And I remember in my village, it is so dark, you cannot see your toes.
Wow.
When you're outside. And so for that reason, because of that contrast, we are able to look at the stars and actually see them and get the beauty out of it. But most of it is when it's full moon, it is so lit that you can actually see meters away or feet away.
Yeah, yeah. So you have another connection though.
So the other connection, this I had to get help from my parents because while the full moon was a joyous occasion, the beginning of the moon cycle, the crescent, had a connection with the people culturally. And according to my parents, people would wait for that crescent, go outside, look at it, and either wish, may you appear well for me. Now I am translating it directly. May you appear well for me, meaning whatever that I have planned for this month, please bring good fortune to me. If it's a marriage that I'm arranging, if it's planting season, whatever.
Whatever my projects this month are, please attend them.
Attend to them, yes. And not to say that we worship the moon. It represented deity, it represented God. So you're saying, please appear well for me this month.
Yes. Well, we all can use whatever help we can get.
Definitely. And then the other two connection was, the planetary movements, and people did not have watches back in the day. So they told time to set off on a long journey. 3 o'clock, whenever a planet or a star appeared, people would know it's time to set off. 9 o'clock, whenever a star or a planet disappears, people will know it's time to either break off a gathering or time for the kids to get to bed.
Yes. You mentioned that, and I just remembered that I remember an article in National Geographic about a writer who met with a particular tribe, and they were trying to figure out how they were going to set the rendezvous time. And they said, when the first quarter of the moon, they told him the phase of the moon. And he was thinking, well, that's, 2 or 3 days of time. But that was as high definition as they needed to make their appointments. So they used the moon.
Absolutely.
Still, I thought, well, that's awesome.
So that's from a cultural perspective. But right now we are grateful to have the watches that give us time.
Yes, of course. We will have time for questions, of course, and people are invited to write them. I do want to thank you so much. You clearly, I know that you worked and you tried to kind of bring together this whole series with more context for us to understand the history and the people of your country, but also of the continent. So thank you so much, Dr. Otieno, for bringing this wealth of information and delights to us. I would also like to thank Victoria Robinson, who is the wizard that makes all of this possible, the College of Letters and Science, the Center for Gravitation, Cosmology, and Astrophysics. I will say that there were designers on this project, both Mia and Elise, who started it a year ago now. And of course, I thank you, the audience, who are here to share this wonderful journey with us. We do have 2 questions that are kind of set up for Dr. Otieno. So what do you miss most about Kenya?
Okay, this answer will be interesting. I miss 3 things. I miss my home, my parents, my people. And I miss the people of Kenya, just to wake up and just to observe kids rushing to go to school, kids just playing, people early in the morning with their, either tractors or hoes or animals just tilling the land. I miss the food. But the one that's most interesting is I miss the smell that comes from the red volcanic soil. When it rains, it produces some very nice smell.
That's, and they say, that smell is hardwired. It really does have we do have visceral responses to smell. Aromas, yes. How lovely. Now I really do I must come to Kenya.
Absolutely.
So what is your favorite place to visit?
Well, I have visited the coastal region. I have visited the lake region. I have visited the highlands of the central Kenya, definitely visited the city. But we have a saying in Kenya, which I probably think is here. It says, east or west, home is best.
Yes.
Home is the best place to visit.
Yes, I agree. All right, so I'm going to, I'm actually just going to put a little bit of propaganda here that you can view if you missed any of the previous programs, or you want to see it again because you enjoyed them. We have them posted on our YouTube channel, which appears right there. And I would like to welcome people to ask questions if they have any on the chat. And I'm actually going to stop sharing so that people can see more of you.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's see what questions we have. So tell us about your role, position at UWM, and how did you decide to come to the US?
So I did my undergraduate in mechanical engineering at Moi University, which is to the western side of Kenya. So studied mechanical engineering. I did one elective called operations research, and I was fascinated by this operations research. And the professor who taught me said, well, if you're interested in this, look for grad school in an area called industrial engineering. And so I applied to several schools in the US, in South Africa, in Germany. The University of South Florida responded fastest and fortunately gave me a teaching assistantship. And of course, hence the reason why I started out in Florida, lived there till I finished my doctorate. 2010, 2009 was a very difficult time, if you remember. And so there were very few open opportunities in academia. And so of the applications that I sent out, I had a few interviews and I chose UWM. At the time, I had a colleague who was here who since left, but the other reason that sold me into Milwaukee was Lake Michigan. I love places that have a huge mass of water. And so Lake Michigan sold me in, not knowing that during the winter, it was going to be a blessing in disguise.
Yes.
Because of the lake effect and the snow that we get. But that's how I came into UWM. Right now, I've been a faculty there for the past 10 years, and I serve as the chair of department right now.
Tell us a little bit about the research that you do.
Well, my research is wide in nature. I am passionate about engineering education. I am passionate about diversity in engineering education. And for that reason, I work with what we call the WiscAMP group, which is Wisconsin Alliance for Minority Participation.
Let's say hello to Monique right here.
Absolutely, one amongst many of such programs in the country. I'm also passionate about sustainability. So part of my research is also looking at sustainability in manufacturing, remanufacturing to be precise. And particularly if you buy a television today, back in the day, the life of a television was about, 20 years. Right now, the life of a television is about 10 years and sometimes much less, especially if you want to go with a trend and get the next. But do we set back to ask ourselves, when I throw away this TV, where does it go? And so there are companies that are remanufacturing products. They get the products, they try to, well, you can call it refurbishing, but remanufacturing is different from sometimes refurbishing, because when you remanufacture, sometimes you would want to give your customer the same warranty as you would a new product, because you're putting a stamp of quality on it.
I see.
So that's one. The other area of research is analytics. Right now, data science is huge, not new, just huge because of the computational abilities that we have right now. And so I apply that in the area of manufacturing and looking at predictive analytics, whether it's for quality control or just defect analysis, or many ways, because data is the new gold, as they call it.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful that you are able to follow your heroes to make a difference in our society. So thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. And thank you for inviting me.
I haven't finished yet. I just wanted to put in a plug that I see the path that you've been inspired by people who make change, and you're one of them. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Has your family visited Milwaukee? And if so, what were their impressions?
My parents, so family is big. Siblings have visited, but I remember the first time my parents visited Milwaukee was winter of December 2010 and January 2011. So that winter, and we had a lot of snow. I lived in Sherwood, and my mother went ahead and washed her clothes because they're this type of clothing that we cannot put in a washing machine,
Right.
right? So she washed them and hung them outside. I was off to work. And when I came back, the dress was stiff. And I told her, Mom, just take it as it is. Bring it in the bathtub or wherever. Just hang it as it is until tomorrow morning. Don't do anything to it because it will definitely break.
Oh my goodness.
So that was my mom's experience with the first winter.
I see. Well, I guess she's had now her first experience, but perhaps you should consider inviting her in the summertime.
Yes. But remember, I will say this. We are from Mumbo. Summertime in the US sometimes actually means between May, definitely, right? Between May and
September.
August and
Mhm.
September. In May, she's busy weeding,
Ah,
and in August, she's busy harvesting.
I see.
To get the African parent to come to the US during the summer is not easy. To
I
get
see.
them to come in the winter is possible because that's our dry season in Kenya.
I see. Well, then maybe a jacket for your mom next
Absolutely, but
time.
they have appreciated coming here. The Midwest is definitely different from Florida. And I have enjoyed actually the diversity that I see in terms of what different regions have to offer in the US.
Did they come to Florida as well?
They did, yes. So that was a big difference, from, well, it was in the winter, so Florida was the best place to be.
Right, of course. Do we have any other questions, Victoria? Okay. Well, we have very successfully spent the better part of an hour. So again, I'd like to thank you so much for sharing these wonderful impressions of your country. And it really, I think, the moment that we're able to get on an airplane, I think we're all going to be seeing, okay, which African country should I go to first?
Back with Kenya, and you'll enjoy what you see in my background, which is the African safari.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the end of the semester. I hope it goes smoothly for you and a very well-deserved break.
Thank you so much. And same to you and Victoria and everyone else who made this possible. Thank you for your artistic nature and abilities. And I appreciate all the audience for your attention. And have a wonderful night for those of you who are in this part of the sphere, and a wonderful, very early morning for those who are in the other parts of the world.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.